Imagine a Marvel vs. DC fighting game, like an official fighting game. I wanted to make this video to express some of the thoughts I had flying into my head because recently I've been playing a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom 2, I've been reading a lot of comics, and I've been rewatching some of the DCEU, and also I'm a big Marvel fan in general. Now, I'm no fighting game expert, and I'm not sure how the creation of games really work. I don't know frame data and all that stuff, but I do have some ideas, so get excited. First, I'd like to start off with who the game would be made by. If I could choose, I would choose Arc System Works, mainly because of the art style and animation. I feel like the game has to be inviting in order to get people to play it. You could say NetherRealm, but NetherRealm's games are sometimes uninviting and too mature for some people, and some of their games just have no color. I wouldn't say Capcom either because they haven't been doing so well. I mean, Street Fighter 6 is pretty good, but before that, it was a long time that Capcom wasn't doing well, and I can't imagine that they want to work with Disney again. They most likely forgot about Marvel vs. Capcom. Personally, I don't really like the 3D animation for fighting games. I always thought 2D animation and pixel art always looked better in fighting games. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Street Fighter 3rd Strike, Dragon Ball FighterZ, I think those all look so much cooler to me than any other 3D fighting game pretty much. I never really liked the looks of Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Street Fighter 5, or Injustice. I think these comic book characters would look much better in a 2D art style. And if you really want to capitalize off of animation right now, you could even put it in a Spider-Verse sort of art style because everything in animation is doing that. Even I feel some games like Mario Wonder are adapting that Spider-Verse animation into their game. So if you have like a comic book art style to the game with everybody being drawn in a different way or animated in a different way, I think that could really sell the game. How the game looks is very important and it has to be welcoming. We already love Marvel and DC and so do the kids. Don't turn us away by having it look edgy and human-like. Also, it's Disney, so it kind of has to be kid-friendly. How will the game play? If it were my vote, I would say Marvel vs. Capcom 2 or 3, either or. I know I said it's not made by Capcom, but they did it with Dragon Ball FighterZ, so I feel like it could easily be implemented into a new game. I feel like this style of gameplay has easy-ass controls for beginners and casuals, but can also be taken to a next level by tryhards and pros and stuff like that. I'd make it so that you can choose 3 characters because I think 2 is too little, and for the amount of characters that I would want in this game, 2 is just a little bit too little for a game that could have literally like an endless amount of characters on the roster. The game will have assists, character interactions, ultimate moves, and maybe even team-up combos depending on who you put on your team. I also think they should add maybe a lot of mini games, and maybe they should have a lobby sort of like in Dragon Ball FighterZ where you could walk around, or like in Street Fighter 6 where you could walk around and challenge other players. Now it's time for the best part of this idea, the characters. The characters are so important when it comes to making something like this. Marvel and DC are both so iconic in pop culture, so picking the characters are crucial. If this game were to be released, I think having 16 players each side is a good start. 32 characters in all, 8 heroes, 8 villains for both sides. You may say that it's too many fighters, but Marvel vs. Capcom 2 had 50 plus characters back in like 2002, and for more recent reference, Smash Ultimate started off with like 70 characters, minus some if you include the clones. Honestly, choosing for both sides wasn't that hard. I feel like both the Marvel and DC side are obvious for the starting roster. For the Marvel side, the first 4 are pretty obvious. Spider-Man, of course, the face of Marvel and top 3 most popular superheroes ever created, and then I would add maybe some of the Avengers, so I would do Captain America, Hulk, Iron Man. I was thinking about adding Thor, but I would have to leave him out just so we can fit in some other characters, and out of the Avengers, I feel like, at least out of those 4 Avengers, I feel like he's maybe the least known or least popular. Hulk, Iron Man, and Captain America are definitely essential. Hulk I would probably say is Marvel's 2nd most popular character ever, and Iron Man and Captain America have seriously gone up in popularity thanks to the MCU. Then, of course, Wolverine, the most popular X-Men ever, and probably top 3 most known Marvel characters, at least back in the day, like the early 2000s. And you can't not have X-Men in this game because we saw how well that did with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. As I said, I wasn't adding Thor, and that's because I felt like somebody else would be more important, such as Mr. Fantastic. You can't not have the Fantastic Four in this game. They might not all be in the starting roster, but having at least one of them is essential. I was thinking Human Torch, but having someone with just fire powers I feel can be not as creative as someone who could stretch. And Mr. Fantastic is the leader of the Fantastic Four, so I feel like he is more essential. I know Human Torch was like the first Marvel superhero ever, but I think Mr. Fantastic would be cooler to have. They have to be represented as they're Marvel's first family, and I feel like in media they're underrepresented and a lot of people think they're corny, so having him in a game would be really cool. The last 2 were kind of tricky. To feel the hero side, I had to get with the times, so I chose Black Panther and Black Widow. I know we're missing a lot of X-Men, Fantastic Four, and a lot of other Avengers and characters, but it's Disney, so you can't not have a Black character or a lady character on the starting roster, so I feel like they had to be on this list. Now for the villain side of Marvel, this was actually really fun. You could just do the arch nemesis of each of the heroes on this side, but that works more for DC than it does for Marvel, as some Marvel villains straight up nobody gives a shit about. So I'd say Green Goblin, Spider-Man's Joker. I know Venom is more popular and he's been in the recent Marvel vs. Capcom games, but I do think Green Goblin is more essential to Spider-Man than Venom is, as he is his arch nemesis. I think his playstyle could be really cool. He could sort of have the animation and move like Firebrand from Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He could use maybe his finger lasers like he does in the comics. He could use a bunch of the Goblin bombs and the Goblin like batarang things he uses. And he could even have some cool finishers or like assists where he calls in his glider and it comes from the other side, sort of like how he got impaled, but instead it doesn't actually impale him. I just think Green Goblin's moveset could be really cool, and I would love to see him in a fighting game. Next villain, Magneto, villain of the X-Men. He's essential. Dr. Doom, of course, probably one of the best villains ever created and one of the biggest bads ever, most known villains ever. You can't not have him in this game. And he's been in a lot of the Marvel vs. Capcom games. And obviously, for more recent times and just popularity, Thanos. You can't not include him, as the MCU made him even way more popular than he probably already was. Here's where it gets interesting. Next villain, I say Namor, or Namor, however you want to say it. I know Namor isn't necessarily considered a villain or a hero. I don't want to say he's an anti-hero. He more just fights for his own cause. But having him on the villain side, I think would be really cool. And he's like one of Marvel's first superheroes or villains or characters in general. And he's like considered the first mutant. I think him in this game would be really amazing. And plus he was in the new Black Panther movie, so I think he might grow in popularity. Some of these slots were hard because I didn't really know who else to pick. I said Whiplash. I think Whiplash could be really cool. I think he could have a really unique moveset with the Whiplashes, of course. He may not be that popular, but I do think having an Iron Man villain is cool, and I think he might be the coolest to have in a fighting game. The last two slots are hard. I originally had Venom and Red Skull, but Venom I think I might leave to DLC, and Red Skull I think I will keep because, I don't know, this is kind of hard actually. Okay, actually I would keep Venom, take out Red Skull, as Red Skull I don't really see like a cool moveset that he could have besides like a gun. And I know he has like super soldier powers, but I do think Venom is cooler, so I would actually probably keep him in. And for the last character slot, I would have Taskmaster. Taskmaster is very cool, and I feel like he needs justice done to him. That Black Widow movie had no justice done for him. That was whack. And he was in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, so I feel like a reappearance by him would be pretty cool. Of course, there are other villains that you could add. The list is endless, like Super Skrull, the Mandarin. There's so many villains that it's hard to choose from. So that's it for the Marvel side. The heroes: Spider-Man, Hulk, Captain America, Iron Man, Wolverine, Mr. Fantastic, Black Panther, and Black Widow. And for the villain side, Green Goblin, Thanos, Magneto, Dr. Doom, Whiplash, Venom, and Taskmaster. Real quick, while editing this video, I had totally forgot that Kang, Ultron, and Loki existed. So instead of Venom and Taskmaster, I would probably add Kang and Ultron, and maybe leave Loki for DLC with Thor. But as I said before, you could definitely flip and flop any of the villains or heroes. There's too many to pick from. Now time for the DC side. The heroes, the Justice League. It's as simple as that. They have a whole team you could just put right on there. Everybody knows them. We're gonna do Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, the big three, and two of those are the two most top superheroes ever known. Then obviously we'll do Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman. The last two were sort of a toss-up because I didn't really know who to choose. I was thinking Shazam, but I feel like he'll be too similar to Superman, so you could probably just leave him for DLC. So the last two slots I chose Cyborg. I was thinking Green Arrow, but no. So for the last slot I chose Martian Manhunter. I don't really know too much about him, but I think he can shapeshift. That can maybe work into the game. I think that'll probably be cool. And for the villain side, is pretty much just the arch nemesis of the Justice League. Joker, Lex Luthor, Cheetah. I was thinking Reverse Flash, but I don't see how he can be too different from the Flash, so I actually chose Captain Cold instead. Sinestro, Black Manta. I don't know Cyborg's villain. I think he's pretty much always on a team, so I chose Darkseid. And last, I'm going to have Harley Quinn. She's very popular right now, and she's another form of female representation. And that's pretty much it for the characters. For the DC side heroes, it's the Justice League. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Cyborg, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter. And for the villain side of DC, Joker, Lex Luthor, Cheetah, Captain Cold, Darkseid, Harley Quinn, Sinestro, and Black Manta. Now for a very important part of this game, the story. Now I'm no writer. I always hated writing. I even took a writing class in college and I didn't like it, so I'm not really good with coming up with stories. But I feel like for a game like this, it doesn't have to be too complicated. It could be something really simple. Maybe something like Secret Wars, something easy to digest. A higher power teleports both of these universes to like a planet or a different dimension, and said higher power is, we could just literally say he's bored and he wants to see them fight. And then maybe along the way, some misunderstanding happens when somebody on one of the sides dies and the other team thinks it's them. So then they start fighting each other, trying to avenge whoever they thought killed somebody, but really it was all a game by the higher power, something like that. Another story I heard of a crossover that actually happened, the Amalgam Universe. The physical embodiment of Marvel and DC became aware of each other, and they only thought that one of them could exist, so they had their heroes fight for their existence. That's a simple enough story. Or instead of a higher power, if that's too corny, you could just make it so that it's one of the villains on each side. You could have it so that a villain discovers how to travel the multiverse, probably like Doctor Doom, because he just straight up be fiending. And doing so, they find the DC or the Marvel universe, and they would like to rule that universe because, you know, why not? And along the way, one of the villains kills somebody from the other universe, and the heroes of that universe put the blame on the heroes of the other universe, and then they start to fight. Or maybe something like Darkseid figures out how to travel the multiverse, and he finds Thanos, so he decides to team up to try to take over the world or something like that, or the universe, and they decide to make a deal. And maybe they fuse like Ultron Sigma in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. The fuse is kind of corny, but it could work. There's a bunch of different possibilities that you can come up with. I don't think the story is too important. Just having good gameplay and good characters and a good art style, making it inviting, that's all that really matters. Now, if this game were to come out, a way to keep it alive is DLC. DLC is very important to something like this. I don't think the story mode should have a final conclusion. I do think it should end, but I don't think it should be finished. I think it should be left off on a cliffhanger or something that could allow for DLC to be expanded into the story, to add more characters to the situation, and to keep the game going and going and going. I think the DLC should maybe come out like 4 to 6 months after the game is released, something like that, or maybe like 2 to 4 months. I don't know, maybe 6 is a bit too long. I think the DLC should come out in seasons, and the seasons should have waves in them. And the waves are released maybe a week or 2 apart, just so that you don't get bored of the DLC all in one bunch, so that after a week you get to learn the character, and then a new character, and then a new character within that season. So for the first DLC, you would have to start off with a bang, and I think the best way to do that is X-Men versus Teen Titans. The DLC could be story and character DLC. They just get added to the battle. That's pretty much as simple as that. And the X-Men are teenagers in some of the iterations, so I do think it could work. Just imagine Cyclops versus Robin, Tim Drake or Damian Wayne, Beast versus Beast Boy, Jean Grey versus Starfire, Storm versus Raven, or you can choose whatever characters from any iteration, but I do think those would be cool. I know Storm came later in like the X-Men canon timeline, but this game will be its own canon, so you could really just toss characters around like however you want. Even a cooler one, you could do like a Clone Saga DLC. No, not like that Spider-Man Clone Saga storyline, but a DLC that acknowledges the Marvel and DC clones of each other, but don't actually make them clones because that'll just be a waste of money and time. Deadpool versus Deathstroke, Hawkeye versus Green Arrow, Doctor Strange versus Doctor Fate, Winter Soldier versus Red Hood. Come on, oh my gosh. Big Wheel versus Angleman. No, I'm just kidding. I have so many ideas for characters and so many ideas for the starting roster, but I don't think that a game would release with 50 plus characters. Games just aren't built like that nowadays, especially fighting games. They haven't been doing so good. Of course, there are characters I haven't forgot about. Like I said, the Fantastic Four, Ghost Rider, Punisher, all those people I haven't forgot about. The Green Lantern Corps, you can maybe do something like that. Young Justice people, Kid Flash, the sidekicks, all those people. I wanted to express some of the other DLC ideas I had too. If Venom didn't get added, you can maybe do like a Miles Morales and Venom versus Static Shock and Ebon, Daredevil versus Nightwing, Ghost Rider versus Lobo. I'm not saying that all these characters are alike or clones, but I do think if they were presented together, it could definitely build up a lot of hype. Also, when I say versus, I don't actually mean that they will fight each other. I just think it's cool to advertise as versus. And probably one of the last things I have to say, can this game actually happen? I actually don't think it's that impossible. Just a few years ago, we didn't think that Spider-Man could be in the MCU, and we never even saw Batman and Superman on the same screen until like 2016. So a lot of things can happen. We have the multiverse now. We have Spider-Verse confirming that every Spider-Man movie is like in the same sort of universe. I feel like anything is possible. We never thought that we'd get Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. It's definitely the age of crossovers in the multiverse right now. Fortnite literally has like everything in it. They have like every universe in Fortnite. It's like the biggest crossover event ever. Smash Bros exists. They have like 15 plus games, or maybe I don't know, maybe like 10 crossover games in Smash Bros, and that was done back all the way in like 1999, and Smash Bros still happened even recently with all those crossovers. I do think somewhere down the line this game will happen. I think it's very possible. It would just take a lot of time and a lot of talking and a lot of stubborn CEOs and businessmen trying to come together and just argue. It's definitely possible, and if it did happen, I just wish that it was done with a lot of passion, and I wish that whoever does it puts in all the love and care that they can to the game, and that they listen to the fans too, because sometimes fans do know better. Also, I would like to give a shout out to the YouTuber Casper. He made a recent video called Marvel Melee, a fighting game concept. You should definitely go watch that video. He does have a lot of cool ideas, but that's pretty much a summary of the ideas I had. I just really needed to get it out because I feel like this is such a good idea, and I feel like you could definitely maybe like even start a petition for something like this to happen. But let me know what characters you would want in a Marvel versus DC fighting game, and how would you want the game to play? Who would you want it to be made by? How would you want the story and all that jazz? So stay tuned.